Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sari Francis, Director of Content Protection Services at Elsevier. We're very excited to talk about this topic today, of bridging the cybersecurity gap. But before we get started, I'd like to ground the conversation with a quick intro about SNSI, which is the Scholarly Network Security Initiative, and it's the sponsor for today's session. SNSI was formed in 2018, convening publishers, institutions, and technologists. SNSI works to solve cyber challenges that threaten the integrity of the scientific record, scholarly systems, and safety of personal data. As a force of diverse, committed publishers of all sizes, learned societies, and university presses, and beyond these risks, these challenges can be more effectively and efficiently addressed together. As the co-chair of the SNSI University Relations Working Group and my role within Elsevier, I found myself around this time last year wanting to connect with others that were like-minded about cybersecurity within the scholarly publishing community. The goal was to improve communication on security alerts, provide guidance and support to enhance security and access management. Thus, the Library Security Advisory Group was born, and several of whom are here today. I chose each member of this group for their proactive approaches, curiosity, experience with cybersecurity, and let's face it, their ability to put up with me. So, on to these wonderful panelists. Can you please tell the audience a bit about, each one of you, a bit about your background, what you see happening in the cybersecurity space today, why you joined the group, and finally, what you would like the audience to learn about in today's session and take away. So, Andrew White, we'll start with you.
So I've been working in libraries in all academic libraries for over 35 years. And my background includes work in public and technological services as well as administration for information technologies in libraries. The reason I wanted to be part of this and what I see happening is that the ecosystem continues to pose a bunch of challenges for libraries. And we've been hearing a lot about those for the past 2 days. So while the focus for this particular panel is going to be on access and identity management, we've been hearing over the past 2 days, there are lots of other threats that exist with regard to information technology, and that's research integrity, misinformation, disinformation, from AI, copyright, and intellectual property conditions. I joined the group because I sit within the CIO's cabinet at my institution, not the provost cabinet. So I am an IT service organization at my institution. And as a result, a comment was made yesterday that information security is a shared responsibility. So I share in that responsibility. I'm part of that team that works with cybersecurity. So it includes the networking group, the infrastructure group, and so on and so forth within Central IT. So what I'd like you to take away from today's conversation is that cybersecurity only succeeds when it's a team-based approach. And there's got to be clear understanding of objectives, goals, and transparent communication between all the parties that are involved in cybersecurity.
Ben, cool. Go down the line.
Sure. Ben Walk, I am actually Governance Awareness and Training Manager in the Information Security Office at the Rochester Institute of Technology. So I'm coming in as neither a librarian nor a publisher, but I guess more of I'm not going to call myself an expert. I know Sari will, but I won't. I just know how much I don't know. But I'm here, one, because she asked, and I thought that I could provide a different type of perspective in terms of what does an information security office look at when we're looking at risk, and also just kind of determining. I wanted to learn more about the risks that the libraries and publishing industry are facing as well, because I feel like we don't spend a lot of time focusing on that. We're very diligent in terms of what type of information is it? Is it private information? Is it confidential information? We're going to take a risk-based approach. But we don't look as much from the information security side in terms of availability, which is, I think, more of an IT approach to it. So I signed up because I have a voice. I tend to make my opinions known on these things, and I think it's been clarifying in some of our conversations. The cybersecurity space is interesting, as all of you might imagine. There have been a ton of presentations here on Gen AI, which is at every single conference I'm at in the last year or so, it seems like. And we're coming into it. I'm actually co-chair of an AI Safety and Security Advisory Committee at RIT. So we're actually looking at risks associated with Gen AI and trying to determine some controls around a very, very rapidly evolving area. So I'm trying to learn more about how it's going to be used in the library space, but also I think what I bring as a perspective and what I would ask you all to take away, I think, is it's really that importance of establishing relationships and maintaining the relationships with your information security officer or chief information security officer or whoever it may be, because we do not have the same perspective that IT does. IT is typically availability focused. We are much more probably confidentiality focused around things, but I think that you may also find that you may get better responses talking to your information security officers rather than just your IT personnel.
Alrighty, I'm Michelle Polchow, and I'm the Electronic Resources Librarian at the University of California, Davis. And my credentials sound like I shouldn't be here. I typically coordinate with acquisitions and cataloging, and my job is to really be expedient in getting our new content online and also just keeping access to ongoing content. So I really have no job description related to IT or even to cross-coordinate with the IT department. How I got here, or what I see in this space, is exactly what Ben was saying, is that we have the problem of distinguishing between legitimate downloading for text and data mining purposes, or a misunderstanding of how to go about doing text and data mining, versus cybersecurity or questionable cyber activity that's going on. And just last year, it was quite a coincidence that SNSI was doing their presentation while Sari was sending me messages that your downloading is like 140% of what it was last year. And it continued to go on, and I didn't know what to do with it. And I didn't really get a lot of response from our IT. And so by joining this group, I realized how easy it is to hack library resources. And one of the examples is that our IT in their ticket said, you know, this looks legitimate. They're using second factor authentication. And I get home and I get a spoofing email that asks for my cell phone. And I'm like, oh, it is something that they can spoof, that it's not necessarily that you need my credentials for campus, but they've also figured out how to do the second factor authentication. So that was pretty scary for me, and I wanted to learn more, and so this group was a perfect place to kind of follow up with that.
Hi everyone, I'm Anu Murthy. I'm the Electronic Resources Librarian at the Stanford University Medical Center. I've done various jobs. The gigs have been at county library, federal libraries, state library, private university, small, big. And every time I change jobs, I learn so much about the library infrastructure, and that's the fun part of the job. And what do I see happening in our cybersecurity? You all know all our data is everywhere and we are vulnerable. And as librarians, we are here to try and protect the user information because we also have the vendor side that we are protecting their resources when the users are accessing it. We are releasing certain attributes to the vendor. So we just have a role to protect the patron privacy. And why did I join the group? I wasn't looking to join any work group. I was attending this fun debate last year called Resolved. It was a question about does the campus IT, I have to get this right, campus network security is not the library's job, which is what I believe in. But they were debating it and I kept asking uncomfortable questions, I think. And then Sari came from the behind and she said, I have a work group. Do you want to be part of it? I'm like, no, I'm changing jobs. I don't want to be part of this group. However, I have the SNSIs. They have this cool graphic that you all should download. I had always pinned it in my office space right next to Oliver Pesch's e-resource model. I don't know what it's called. It's 2009, Oliver Pesch, this great e-resources life cycle. And then I have the SNSI. Those two are the only things I've had in my office. I think it will take a lot of things from our conversation. We're going to touch on IT, health IT, libraries, resources, licenses. We probably won't touch on the dollar amount we spend, but we will touch on how much each library lost or the institutions lost because of cybersecurity. So that's it. Thank you. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you all. And, it's been great because we started this beginning of the year. And every time we get together, we learn something new about the group, whether it's, Ben talking about something that he learned at EDUCAUSE or sharing ideas for Michelle's brown bag lunch to IT, like, oh, maybe you needed to do this. Oh, okay. So I think it really opens up the conversation on how we can collectively share information and about cybersecurity risk. And as you said, Michelle, everyone's vulnerable, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think also there was, as far as the security alerts, when we talked about, I was building that FAQ page for Elsevier, and I'm like, well, what do you guys want to, when you get these alerts, what does this mean to you? Where especially you, Michelle, you were saying how, I don't even know if it's a real email, and so oh, okay, so let's start there, and so I think, learning what is important to the library community really helped guide us to figure out how we can, help others in this space. But one question came to mind about what we were just talking about earlier and how the crime of opportunity and analogy can help institutions understand the risk of credential theft and help take proactive steps. So how would you, what are your thoughts on that as far as taking preventive steps and further exploration?
We had started to chat about that because we're not in the exact same place on this.
Right.
But we had started to chat about it before this conversation today. For me, coming from the cybersecurity office, most of the attacks we see are essentially crimes of opportunity because it's a pretty wide net. And they're just looking for someone, whether it's falling for a phishing attempt or something else, they're just looking to get accounts that can gain access to things. So I look at it from my view as they're not especially targeted normally. Of course, we get targeted attacks. But normally it's that just being online makes you a potential victim.
I also think, in terms of the library's role here, that in some cases, the credentialing to get access to library materials is sort of the canary in the coal mine, that it is the starting point for deeper penetration into your institute's networking infrastructure. And if you are using single sign-on, having that one set of credentials then allows you to gain access to a lot of other things, not just the library. So a library may be the initial target, but it is not the ultimate intended target within your campus infrastructure.
Yeah, because there's been other examples, and we were just talking about this before, and I couldn't remember what institution it was, but there was some kind of cyber attack where it trickled down all the way to the parking, and so people couldn't actually go get, swipe their card to like park in staff lots, and so like it can have that trickling effect. So, just because it starts in the library doesn't mean that it can't, spread, or if it starts somewhere else that it can't also go to the library.
And then
Go ahead.
Yeah, no.
a small example is like we all know about the British Library's breach. So first it was the British Library, and then the military records, 270,000 were taken, and then the transportation, and it's only going to continue, right? Because they got the data and they're targeting all the other connected accounts or organizations, institutions. It's just it is an opportunity if we don't keep it secure. And we can only do that if we work together, whether it's publishers or institutions or.
So how do we do that, like better communicate, sorry, go ahead, Michelle.
I'm gonna add some scary statistics that I've been sharing. As Sari said, I've been doing a brown bag series on a variety of e-resource issues. And I would kind of get to the point where this isn't an acquisitions issue, this isn't a cataloging issue. How can I get this to public services? How can I get to even access services and interlibrary loan? But in preparing for these, I ran across that in 2021, there was a survey of 250 librarians, and 47% agreed that illegal sites such as Sci-Hub are useful for learners. And if you think you have a 1 hour, one-time shot to explain all of the marine science databases and the special features the databases have, you don't want to spend 20 minutes on authentication. And so to bypass this, I guess, the public service librarians are saying, use Sci-Hub. So, pirate sites operate from credentialed sources or sharing, and to understand that library professionals really need this education. So it's not necessarily just our students, but I continued on to learn about, and this actually came from SNSI 2 years ago, maybe. So Gen Z and cybersecurity, Gen Z born between mid-1990s and 2010, the perception is that they're very well-versed in data privacy and online security since they were kind of digitally born. But it's reported that nearly 60% of Gen Zers never receive any cybersecurity training. Gen Z has the highest victimization rate for phishing. It's the second highest rate for identity theft, and they will often trade their personal data for a discount or some kind of reward. So between the librarians suggesting they use Sci-Hub and an audience that, you want to read some ebooks at UC Davis? Sure, I'll give you my credentials, but that is a crime of opportunity because the breach that we had was through our central network. It was not an IP breach, and that was the first time we had a single sign-on breach. And I realized, not only can they read the ebook now, but they can get into my retirement account. And University of Michigan had a breach like this not long ago, and someone on that campus actually said they didn't know where this was leading, and faculty were going to the campus and unplugging their research computers because they didn't know how far that crime of opportunity was going to go. So not just parking.
Right.
So These are my slides. I'm using the the old fashioned. But that's my statistics that I have to read. So back to you.
Well, actually, I was gonna just ask Ben, like, because you teach students at RIT about cybersecurity, so
Yeah,
what's
so
your
I'm,
thoughts on
so
that?
in addition to my day job, I also adjunct teach, and I teach a class in cybersecurity policy and law. And it's a required course for our cybersecurity majors, which we probably have close to 500 of them at our university right now. So kind of got the threat outside, a little bit of threat inside in all of that. But it's interesting in terms of this Gen Z perspective you're talking about, but they think they're really good at this, but they're not. And we see it, especially if we get an internally compromised account, and it's anything about a work from home, work for a professor, be an assistant, get $350 a week, even though the math doesn't work out to $350 a week. In the email, we'll get hundreds of students who respond to this. And we are offering a cybersecurity fundamentals course for incoming students. So there is this whole, you can teach them what they should know, but that doesn't mean that they're practicing properly as well. So, you know, a lot of this, to me, it's culture change. It takes a lot of time, takes a lot of repetition, takes coming at things from different angles.
So what are some suggestions that, or things that you've done within your organizations that have,
Obviously, I still have hundreds, hundreds of students responding to these things.
Right,
For us, it's really trying to communicate multiple times, multiple ways about multiple threats and vulnerabilities, but it is really hard to get people's attention at a university.
So for us, we actually had, he was the president of the graduate student government. And he came and said, I use Sci-Hub because I can't use your interlibrary loan. What do you mean you can't use our interlibrary loan? So that's kind of the start of an education conversation, right?
right.
So, okay, why you should not be using Sci-Hub? Do you actually understand what Sci-Hub is? And I think that is somewhat of the Gen Z equation as well. A colleague at another institution had pointed out that at his institution, the students have to log into everything except the library. And their question was, well, gee, I have to log into everything else. Why don't I log into the library? And that may be a culture behavioral change for us as librarians to require that. You know, we set up IP authentication, and you know, the work that we've been doing at Rensselaer was as much as I can. If I can get away from IP authentication, I can do more EduRoam, Internet 2, federated authentication. That's going to improve my security. It's not a guarantee, but it will improve what we are able to monitor and how I, as the library, can work with a publisher and work with our identity management team in IT to say, all right, we kind of lock things down. But that education component, along the lines of what you're talking about, Ben, I think that's really the key. And no matter how many times you tell them, they still, and I don't think it's just the students. I think there are faculty as well. There are faculty who, I've heard the phrase, they library hop. So if they can't get the article immediately, they contact a colleague at another institution who will, that institution has access to that particular journal. They'll download the PDF and then ship it over by email. So it's a roundabout way, but it's another violation of what our agreements are.
Michelle, do you have any thoughts on communication?
Yeah. I think the experience that I had last year, the campus side of IT was frustrating in that I saw the usage as not normal, that there was definitely very intentional downloading, and the pattern that was given was that They test it out for a couple days and creep up. They test out a couple and then full guns and download, and then they quit. And so the first time, I just stepped aside, never have done an SSO breach, just to see what would happen. And so Ben was very insightful as our group to point out that IT tickets typically are handled as an event. And I look at it, I see that in order to get through this SSO, they would have had to do a second factor authentication. They appear to be legitimate users to us, close the ticket. So about a month later, it did it again, close the ticket. And I'm like, sorry, are you hearing anything from them? No, I haven't heard anything either. So the third time it happened was when we finally got the attention of higher ups in campus IT, and you know, they were saying, like, we deal with over 1 million phishing events, cybersecurity events a day. How come you guys are special? and so I think for us, eventually we found out that the way that our application process was working, that I can come and apply to UC Davis and create a username, and I create my own password. And when we finally were able to pass credentials, because they couldn't figure it out, and Sari's team said, you know, we're here to help, we found out that the pass of the username was blank, and so anyone who wanted to just apply to UC Davis was being able to pass a username with a password they made up. So, I mean, it ended up that a foreign country happened to be the ones who were really interested in applying and then using Elsevier's. And I think in our case too, we are a medical community. We have a huge veterinarian medical school plus a human clinic school and hospital facilities. So I knew that Elsevier had every right to turn this off because Davis couldn't figure out how this was all leaking out. But that meant, in fact, our fourth event was December 23rd, probably, and we're talking to each other like, yes, do we let this go, which is going to be over a holiday, which obviously hackers tend to know that campus is closed during that time. And you know, and she said, we're in the business of service. We're not in the business of shutting off what you just paid for. So we were really in a hard spot to get this resolved, get the faucet turned off. And so I think the group that John spoke on earlier in the conference, I think we internally really need to look at our infrastructures, our technology. You know, you're piling systems onto systems onto systems. And I think last year, Rick Anderson indicated that that was true at his institution. And ironically, I really thought about that when one of our vendors here at this conference said, you know, our IT products are extremely safe. They're, you know, secure and privacy. And I thought, I don't know if the institution side is as secure, that we are in that outward looking to check the list. What are our publishers doing? But are we internally being as diligent about our legacy technology? And so I think that's where I would say I found Davis communication to be an area to kind of take a look at and evaluate the weaknesses and strengths at your own campus. It took a long time.
I agree with whatever Michelle and everybody said. And I want to add that education is a small part of this. In my previous institution, they had rolled out a program called, it's a zero trust security model. And it was done on the health side and not the university side. Then they rolled out, we didn't know about it. So everything, all the library resources cannot be accessed by the health side. So I kept submitting support tickets, and thanks to this group, I learned that support tickets are meant to be closed, not worked on. So they kept closing it. Every day I'll submit 2 in the morning, 2 at night. Everything will be closed, no action, no response. Everything is in order, no IP changes. And then I had to escalate it with the dean, had to go to the CIO and say, we have all these millions of dollars spent on these resources, but our users cannot use it. So communication with the health IT, university IT, and explaining all these things, and they don't realize that we have resources for millions of dollars. So educating them on that, and then after that, you just meet. We met every hour, every week an hour, which was kind of interesting because I learned so much from them and they learned so much from me, I think, about the library and resources. So education is all, I would just want to add that. And as Michelle was talking about the two-factor authentication, recently they were talking about Google, protect your Google account because people have gotten to your Gmails and they can do the two-factor authentication, and one morning you want to log into your Gmail and it's gone. I didn't read it a lot, but that's there. So two-factor check, they've already cracked that. And if you want to add something, Ben,
There are multiple layers of two-factor authentication, and we have it, depending on who you are in the university, it's rolled out differently. And we use dual mobile, which is a very common one. One of the two-factor methods on that is literally a phone call. And we run into what we call MFA fatigue because, I got 6 phone calls to do this, I must need to say yes. And at that point, the account gets compromised. But you've also got SMS, it can be a text thing, or there's an app, which is far more secure on that. So MFA is more nuanced than just a second factor, and there are more secure ways of setting something up.
But even with the MFA, to your point, Ben, so we use Duo at Rensselaer, and we actually switched it so that there are no phone calls.
Yeah.
And there are no SMS, no text messages. You have to use the app on your phone as a way to kind of clamp down even further. But we use that for library resources. And particularly any of those resources where we moved away from IP range recognition, we moved to federated authentication. The combination of the federated authentication plus that Duo multi-factor has really tightened things down. It also, in our conversation, Sari, it actually gives us more data to do the forensics. So that we have more information on the IT side about whose credentials were being used to access this material. And I know fortunately has not happened at Rensselaer, but I know that there are other customers, SI customers, where even with the same system that we've got at RPI, there's still been a way to kind of crack the system.
Yeah, it's always gonna, they just keep getting smarter. And we have to kind of keep up with all of that.
Keep building your fence a little bit higher than your neighbor, so they'll go there.
Right. I know we're kind of close to the time where we should be having the audience ask questions, but before we do, I just wanted to know just what you were touching on earlier about how you connected with your IT department, and something that you said last year was about, you needing to have those, just have some resources or a way to connect with and, speak the language of IT. And so through SNSI, we created a toolkit for librarians. So just let you guys all know that there is on the site. So we have that live, and we might have even some hard copies left Yeah, Susie gives me the thumbs up. So in case anyone's interested, we're also using.
Also with four?
Um,
yeah, long one.
so, on that note,
Is
just.
that? Otherwise, I'm just gonna take them home with me. I'm going. Actually, I'll take another one to give out.
Okay.
One for myself.
So does anyone have any questions before we kind of wrap things up? Or, that's
The tip sheet,
the tip sheet.
which
We have
is in the
that too.
toolkit too, so, yeah. I was gonna say, I think, for me, what hangs at your desk, reminding your, colleagues and students about the risk of sharing. But I think, also we were doing Get FTR as he leaves to do his own session. But having really clear ways to explain how to do authentication is important too, so that you don't have such complexity that you're asking your friend at another university to send you an article. So, but there are ideas on this kind of toolkit sheet to take home and look and see what's fitting for your institution as well.
Any questions from the audience? Yes.
I just wonder how often you run penetration tests or you're audited as libraries individually or as the institutions holistically.
I'll go first, I guess. We're using Rapid7. So we have a SIM, which is Security Incident and Event Monitoring, or I've got it backwards, it's similar, it's one of the two. So we do get notifications, and it is getting pretty sophisticated. That's a constant on. We also have a Security Operations Center that we've outsourced because we have no one who wants to work 24/7 on anything like that. So we're getting probably daily reports at this point, but this is a new thing for us. A year ago, we didn't have all this. And the amount of information it gives you and the detail level to me is astounding. And I don't think there's any Gen AI component at this point, but when we can find out that 2 different mail accounts had rules changed and it came from one IP address to these different accounts, and all of a sudden we've got that information. That's just amazing to me that we can find out. And the rules change is kind of we're gonna trick them through phishing, and then we're gonna set up a rule so that they don't get any information from us if there's a problem. But we're able to get a lot more detail now, but now it's because we have the tools. A year ago, we would have been blind to that.
So at Rensselaer, we've been running a SIEM since just around the pandemic. And we do pen testing pretty periodically. We also do phishing testing. So we send out, fake phishing emails and see how many people bite. So we run a report on that as well.
And do you do that at a library level as well? I'm just trying to see if there's a relationship.
We do it at an institute-wide level. Yeah. In addition, we have kind of a compliance software that all staff and students need to go through a compliance training on cybersecurity.